Welcome to Performance Car Lounge, where each week we speak with enthusiasts selling their beloved performance cars. This week, we speak with the seller of a Ford Mustang Boss 302 Laguna Seca edition. G'day and welcome to the podcast, everyone. Today we're talking about a track-focused limited edition Boss 302 Mustang, and hang around at the end of the podcast where we'll have a chat about a 2002 Commodore that's currently for sale on Carsales for $1.5 million. But first, I'd like to introduce the owner of this Boss 302 Laguna Seca edition Mustang. Good morning, Terry. Welcome to the podcast.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well. So could you tell us a little bit about your car history and how you came to own such a limited edition special Mustang?
Well, my car history goes back into the 50s when we lived at Pymble, and my father took me up the top of the hill there at Beechworth Avenue to see the first Red X rally go around Australia with the really old cars. And that's when the Pacific Highway at Pymble was only a two-lane dirt track, literally. So we went up there and looked at the old rally cars, and that gave me a passion for cars, which I've had ever since. So having done a bit of motor racing myself and a bit of rallying I've been around the car thing for so long it's not funny. Just a bit of history with racing. I've done 6 Bathurst 1000 races and done the London to Sydney Marathon twice, London to Mexico, Panama to Alaska, around Australia, around New Zealand. I'm trying to think what else I've done, but there's been a fair bit of competition history there in
Absolutely.
short life.
Yeah.
So.
Sounds like competition is in your blood. So can you tell us a little bit briefly about your Bathurst 1000 experiences? What cars did you drive and who did you drive with?
Well, they were it was in the old days, 76 to 81, which was the 6 years. And back in those days, you had the 4 classes, right? So the initial 2 were done with an RS 2000 Escort that Ford basically bought 25 of them into the country.
Yeah.
And we did 2 years in that with a guy called Barry Jones. Unfortunately, Barry's passed away now, but he came quite famous to the RX-7s, and I think he won a couple of races, partnered with Alan Jones, the Formula One driver, and then moved into the V6 Capris with a guy from South Australia, a guy called Eric Board, and we had a couple of years with Eric, and then the final 2 years, 80 and 81, with the Series 3 Capris with a guy called Peter Hopwood, who was quite a famous sailor as well as an excellent car driver. So those were the 6 years at Bathurst. We always finished. We were not involved in that massive crash up the top of the mountain with Bobby Morris and Christine Gibson in 81. But we were going down the Conrod Strait, so we missed it. But we got the red flag at the bottom of the straight. So so that was a bit about the history of that. But to be quite honest, I think Bathurst is an exciting circuit. But doing these long distance rallies, where, for instance, in the London to Mexico, they closed the Panamera Highway for 160 kilometres. So you were timed to the second going across this highway, across top mountains, down through gorges, horses running across the track, the roads, and all sorts of things like that. It sort of makes it really exciting compared to Bathurst, where you don't know where you're going. You're travelling at 200 kilometres an hour over the crest of a hill. So
I've done a little bit of track driving and racing myself, nothing like you. And I always thought that I'd love to even just do some rally racing or a Targa race. And the first thing I did is I went and tried a hill climb, and I realized that as I was doing that hill climb, the trees were just right there. And if I made a mistake, I was into a tree or a rock or whatever. And then I decided that was too risky for me. So I take my hat off to you for rally racing. I think that is actually the pinnacle of motorsport, because as you say, you're not driving around the same circuit over and over. It's constantly changing conditions. And what a fascinating experience you've had.
Well, that particular stage I talked about, the 160 kilometres there on the Panama on that rally, I beat Hannah Meckler, who was he was World Rally Champion. I think I beat him by about 2 minutes, and the third guy was a guy called Ross Duncan, which was an Australian guy. So it was quite spectacular. But the funny thing is, the next stage was 14 kilometres in mud, and I think the 2 minutes I picked up on Hannah Mickler in that stage, he got back plus more on the 14-kilometre mud stage. So
Right.
it didn't really matter that much, I guess.
So yeah, you clearly got a extensive history with cars and racing, and what sort of got you into the Mustangs?
Well, as a boy growing up in the 60s, I think the cars I really loved most of all was the Ford Mustang, the E-Type Jaguar. Funny thing, the Aston Martin Lagonda and the Lamborghini Espada. Those all were just cars that I drooled over in the 60s, and I've been lucky enough to own the whole lot of them. So it's not it's something I went out and with my way to buy and make sure I owned them.
Wow. And I
So
think a lot of those cars appeared in films and movies as well, didn't they? Would it be fair to say that's where you first noticed them, or were they more in and around the scene you were
well,
into?
the E-Type, the first E-Type was obviously a white one, in I think it was William Street when I was in my early teens. My father took us in there into William Street to have a look at this white E-Type that was in the showroom. That was on a Sunday where they didn't even close. I mean, the car dealers were closed on a Sunday, and there was a crowd of about 200 just perving at this white E-Type in the showroom, and it was like a car out of nowhere. And I've always wanted to own one ever since then. So and I'm lucky enough to have owned a few. So it's a very lucky person.
So the Mustang that we're speaking about today is a limited edition 2012 Boss 302 Laguna Seca edition. Can you tell us a little bit about that car?
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about the history because I was on a cruise in Europe, and it was one of those cruises where you sat down with just anyone on the cruise, and there was a Canadian Ford dealer there. And we just started talking, and I told him I love the old Mustangs and all that. And he said, well, there's going to be one released. It's going to be the Boss 302. But he said, if you really want to get something special, there's going to be a Laguna Seca edition. And he said, I think they're only going to make 250 of them. But he said, I, as a Ford dealer, can't even get one for myself because they're allocating on a limited basis to certain Ford dealers who have sold X number of Mustangs, and I haven't sold enough. And he said they're going to make them in black and silver. And he said you probably won't be able to get one, but he said I think they're going to be mostly auctioned off. The dealers will auction to get a hell of a lot better price than the sticker price they've got on them. So I started inquiring, and by the time I'd inquired and found that they was such a pushback from the Ford dealers, they went from 250 to 750. So they increased the allocation of the car. So through a lot of research and all that, I eventually managed to track one down in San Antonio, Texas, of all places. And after a fair bit of negotiation, it was mine. So it was a bit of shipping it all back and then having it converted to right-hand drive.
Who did the conversion, Terry? I was looking at the photos of the car, and for anyone who's interested and wants to see these photos, they'll be on the performancecarlounge.com.au website. But I was looking at the photo of the conversion, Terry, particularly in the interior, obviously, and it looks like they've done a perfect
Oh,
left to right conversion.
this got the car was shipped to Armidale. The guy up in Armidale was an expert. He was given to me as the number one guy in Australia to do this thing, and it wasn't cheap, to be honest. It was over 40,000 to have the conversion done, but
Yeah.
the job was absolutely perfect. The car, you wouldn't even know that it was left to right hand drive. And as a matter of fact, I've had the car for sale for a little while now, and one of the people but actually bought it and put an offer in on it was an American. Why he wanted it was because it had such low mileage and had never been tracked and all that. So he wanted it. And we did a deal, and I was very happy with the price he offered. And it wasn't until we were starting to do the paperwork, he asked a very question. He said, is that car, is you changed the steering wheel on it? And I said, yeah. And he says, by God, he said, I never knew they made them. I said, well, they haven't. It's been converted. And anyhow, after that, obviously he didn't proceed with the deal. I'd already taken the deposit, but gave it back to him because he
Yeah.
just never thought that anyone had ever changed the steering wheel to the other side. So it's been an excellent conversion, and it drives beautifully. So
And this is when we talk about a Boss 302, so there was a first generation of Boss 302s in like from 69 to 72 that Alan Moffat raced that one in the Australian Touring Car Championship. And then this is the second generation of Boss 302 Mustangs. Is that correct?
That's correct. They didn't use the Boss 302 name from, I thought it was 71, but 72 will do,
Yeah.
uh, right through till they decided to make the Boss 302 there in 211. And the Laguna Seca was a very special limited edition track version that was actually made and named after the Laguna Seca circuit in California, just out of Monterey. And the reason they did that is because Parnelli Jones won the Trans Am, which was a very famous racing series in America. Won it in I think it was 81 or 61, 71 or something. So they hadn't used it since he actually won it, and he won it at the Laguna Seca circuit, which is why they named this particular track version after that circuit and his famous win. So that's a bit of the history about the car. So in relation to the naming of it.
Yeah, and a cool little detail with the car is on the back. I'll put a photo of it on the website. The badge has the track map of the Laguna Seca circuit as well, which is a nice touch, I think.
Well, it is, and to be quite honest, when I first got the car, I thought that was the petrol tank, the start of the petrol tank. So
Yeah.
yeah, it is a nice touch. It really is. So, but the car, as in the photo, hasn't got the front spoiler on it. It's got a very big front spoiler that's locked into it, and it holds the front down at speeds greater than 150 kilometres an hour. But I don't find that can't do that in Australian roads, and that car's never been on the track, so it's not as though you need that front spoiler just driving around the streets. But it does look spectacular. You can probably find a few in America that actually have that front spoiler attached to it.
And yeah, it does look special, and it really is a race car for the road. And I watched a road and track YouTube video where it actually lapped Laguna Seca faster than a GT500. So it's definitely a track focused fast car.
Yes, yeah, I've got to agree with you there. I don't know whether you can see this particular. Can you
Yeah.
see that? Well, that's the front page of a thing where it was done a comparison back then. I'm not even sure what was a Top Gear, where you can see it's got the black one down there, and it's up against a Bugatti Veyron. And
Yes.
things when they did this track test, and when you look at the details on that track test, it really did exceptionally well
Yeah.
against these cars. So, without having any rear seats and all that, it's a bit lighter than the average one, and therefore it does go well. So I believe when they made it, they call it the best Mustang they'd made to date. So yeah.
Yeah, so at the time that was the S197 fifth generation Mustang, and that concept for that car was released at the 2003 North American International Motor Show, and it was called a retro futurism design style. And I think it's actually aged really well. I think that Mustang today still looks terrific. And the Laguna Seca edition, on top of the Boss 302 modifications, has some extra details. It's got the red wheels and red roof and the red hockey stick, the iconic Boss hockey stick graphic on the side of the car. And so this car is chassis number 229 of the 750 produced in. And I
Right.
understand there's only three of these Laguna Seca editions in Australia, and this is the only silver
Yeah, there's
one.
two black. They only made them in black and red and silver and red. And I shouldn't really say this, but I think they made about 550 in the black and red and about 200 in the silver and red. I
Yeah.
do think they did make one special other color for some special Ford dealer or something. I just
Yeah,
remember reading about it one stage.
school bus yellow,
Well,
apparently.
that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting color choice. So especially an interesting name for a color. And features for this car were carried over from the Ford Racing Boss 302R racing car. And this has the 5-liter Coyote engine in it, which is still used today. We're up to the seventh generation Mustang. And it had forged crankshafts, CNC ported heads, revised camshafts, a high flow runners in the box intake from the 302R race car, and uses the 6-speed MT82 manual transmission, which is again still used in today's Mustang 7th generation. And I believe it also had a solid rear axle carbon fiber plate in the limited slip differential.
There's
And
something like that. I can't remember. There's some special diff in that car.
yeah, there is. Yeah. Yep.
It's
And
got these quad pipes, two out the back and two out the side. And one's out the side only come in when you get up to a certain rev. I'm not sure what it is because I haven't really revved it that much. So it's quite funny getting it through Rego here in Australia too. So it was a little bit of an effort when we went to register it originally, but
I
it
can
was
imagine.
approved.
Yeah. And it also gets the Recaro sports seats and a larger rear stabilizer, and the ducts to the front brakes to help it on the track. And like you mentioned before, the rear seats have actually been removed, which reduces the weight of the car, of course, but they've replaced in there. There's now an X brace, which increases the rigidity of the car by about 10% as well. So it's definitely a track focused car, and surprisingly, this car has only done 6,950 kilometers. Terry, I don't know how you manage to keep the kilometers so low. I wouldn't be able to stop myself from getting out and driving this car.
Well, I've got another four Mustang, so I've got a Bullet Mustang, one of the new Bullets, and that's done about 27,000 kilometers. And I've got a 77 Special. I don't know whether you know much about those.
No, I don't know. What's that? What's that car about?
That was one that Ford Performance produced for the as a commemorative model for the 1-2 that Moffat and Bond did in Bathurst in '77. That's why it's called the '77 Special, and it's a white. It's a white car with the same striping that the XC Falcon had,
Yes.
and it's got 700 and what's it 727 horsepower, I think.
Wow.
It's you should have a look at it. You should research the
I
77
will.
Special.
I'll flick a.
I've got photos of mine here somewhere, but you'll find it on there. It was mine's that particular car's chassis 3. And when I went to pick it up, Alan Moffat and I had some lunch together, and he handed it over to me down at Ford Performance Racing, which is owned by Rod Nash. I think Rod Nash has got chassis number 2. I'm
Yeah.
not sure who's got chassis. No, it could have even been Alan Moffat, but it's probably been on moved by now. So they were
Wow.
supposed to make about 77 of them, but to commemorate them. But I think they made somewhere in the 30s because I think they ran out of the FM chassis before they finished making them. So I think it was a homologation issue or something. But they're a beautiful, beautiful car. So, and then I've got the old historic rally car, which is another Mustang at home. So that's done quite a few kilometers too. So anyhow.
And that I guess that brings us to the reason you've got a lot of cars. Is the reason you're selling that is because you've got too many cars and nowhere to put them?
Well, you can never have too many cars.
Yeah.
You can never have too many. But my wife said to me about 5 years ago, "You buy one more car, and I'm going to divorce you." So since then, I've bought 4 more, and she's still there.
Oh, she must have found something she likes about you, Terry.
Well, she chose the color of my latest car, which we ordered 14 months ago. So she chose the color of that. So she's very proud of the color scheme on that particular car. So,
Yeah. Are you happy to talk about that car and tell us what
oh
that
yeah,
one?
I don't mind talking about it. Yeah. So it's the very latest Aston Martin DB12.
Yes.
And it's in a deep crimson red, liquid crimson red, with a black and red interior. So I took it for a run the other day. It was the first time I've taken it for a run. I've only had it for a couple of months because I ordered it 14 months ago. So, but that sits with another 4 Aston Martins in the garage. So there's just not enough room for everything, unfortunately. You know,
Well,
if I don't sell this, I'll keep it. I think it's a lovely old car. Sitting
I,
up on hoist at the moment, so at home.
yeah, I
Haven't
was just
been.
about to say I mean, you've got a lot of cars, obviously, and that's why the kilometers are low. You've got a lot of choice, but this would be a very unique driving experience. It'd be quite raw. It's still got the solid rear axle, a rorty V8 putting out, 450 odd horsepower manual. I'm sure it'd be a lot of fun to get out, not just on the track, but on a back road.
I'm sort of having done all that competition history. I chuck in a few Targa Tasmanias as well.
Yeah,
Um, I'm sort of now probably a little bit past this having to turn things sideways all the time and do all
yeah.
those things that I used to have to do when I was a kid. But nowadays, I just go for a leisurely stroll, a leisurely drive out in the country, and all that. And I guess that particular car, I've probably only ever given given a bit of a rev once or twice, just simply because nowadays with all the police and everything else, it's just a nice car to drive around the streets.
You mentioned in the ad that it comes with a second race key that I don't think you've ever used. And what does that race key do in this car?
Well, it changes about 300 settings in the motor. I've just read about it once, about 300. I don't know how you can change 300 settings in a motor.
Yeah.
But I mean, when Ford actually they give you the car, you get a black key, and that black key is set on 2. That's the performance it sets on it. But if you put the track key and use that, it changes it to a setting of about 5. Now, having never used it, I can't really tell you what it's all about, but I'm sure if you research it, you can find out the difference of why you've got a 5 and a red key versus, the modern Mustangs I have, you've got the little thing on the dash where you can change it from sports to sports plus and race and launch and all that. But with this particular red one, you can, that's how you do it. That's how they used to do it prior to the new technology.
Yeah, well, my understanding is that when you use that red key, it alters the ignition timing and the knock sensors to take advantage of, race fuel if you're at the track and it
Yeah.
ups the torque and the throttle response.
And I feel sorry for the Americans, having been to America many times. The octane rating on that fuel over there is pretty lousy. I think they run normally 91. So a lot of the
Yeah,
guys got to buy either the aviation fuel or put some additive in it. But here in Australia, I just run 98 in everything. BP 98 is just my choice of fuel. So
who do you insure the car through? Do you find it hard to get insurance for, a unique car such as this?
no, no, I'm with Shannon's. I can't even remember what it costs to insure. It's not extraordinary, but you get a multi-discount policy, and on top of that, I had an international competition license, which also takes another 10% off, and never having a prang, you get a what is it?
No claim bonus.
No claim bonuses up there at 65, and so I I hit a kangaroo that was in a Jaguar. But when they asked for any other witnesses, all I could say was other kangaroos. But that's all I've ever had is hit a kangaroo in the last whatever it is, 50 years of driving. So
Yeah, I should point out this podcast isn't sponsored by Shannon's, but it seems like everybody I speak with these interesting cars is insured by Shannon's. So Shannon's, if you do want to sponsor the podcast, don't hesitate to reach out.
yeah,
All right, so you've got too many cars. One's got to go. This is a limited edition Ford Mustang Boss 302 Laguna Seca race car for the road. One of 3 in Australia, the only silver one in Australia. Only 6,950 kilometers on it.
it might have just over 7 now because I did take it for a drive the other week which I do. I take them for a drive every couple of months to make sure everything's running all right and everything. So it's probably just clicked over 7,000. I wouldn't like to say 6,000 exactly now, but
Yeah,
I'd
yeah.
have to check it.
It's still not much. So the big question is, Terry, how much are you asking for this piece of motoring history?
Well, once I originally started at 149 during about 14, 15 months ago when I ordered this new car. I thought I'd better sell one off. I think I'm asking 109 now, aren't I? Oh, some time.
500 according to your ad. And if anybody wants to see the ad and get in touch with Terry, head to the performancecarlounge.com.au website. I'll provide a link through to the ad. Given the cost of the conversion, that's almost giving this car away. And Terry, I wouldn't blame you if you decided to hold on to it at that price. I don't see it going down in value given the way cars are going.
Yeah. Well, it's either one car's got to go or the wife's got to go. So I think the car's probably cheaper to get rid of it than the wife.
Well, maybe your wife shouldn't listen to the podcast as well.
Yeah, she's okay with it. She's always thinks that one day she's going to be replaced by a car.
Well, that seems like excellent value to me. And I just wanted to get your opinion, Terry, on another car that's currently advertised on Carsales today. It's a 2002 Holden VX Series 2 Commodore. It's a manual. It's done 205,000 kilometers, and the asking price is $1.5 million. Can you think of any reason why it may be worth that much?
I just think it's got to be a typo.
No, it actually isn't a typo. So the reason why the seller is asking this amount of money is that it was actually given by Holden to Peter Brock,
Yeah.
and Peter Brock's son at the time was a P plater. And so therefore I think he couldn't get like a V8. He must have had to get the V6. And I tell you what, that's a pretty hefty price for a car, although the seller does say that it has no oil leaks, it has shiny hyper yellow paint, and no dings or scratches. What do you think, Terry? Is this a bargain or
Well, I tell you what, I'll go back and say I think it's overpriced to buggery. Peter Brock was a nice enough guy and a great driver because I raced against him at Bathurst and I did know him a little bit. I actually bought off Peter Brock, Bill Patterson Motors down in Melbourne when they had the A9Xs. He had three A9Xs, a four-door, which he raced at Bathurst. He had a two-door that they also set up for racing, but he had one that he drove round the streets, which was also one of the special bodied 14, whatever they were. And it was white and it had the Bill Patterson stripes. That was his day-to-day driver when he was sponsored by Bill Patterson.
right?
When they finished up, and I don't know what happened, I found out about that A9X and went down and bought it. Right, I paid about $5,000 for it back then. It wasn't that much.
Yeah.
Drove it back to Sydney, and some bloke offered me $3,000 more than I paid for it, and I sold it. So I sold it for about $8,000, which is probably the stupidest thing I've ever done. So,
Well,
in hindsight, everything's silly, but there's a car that nowadays is around the traps. I remember the name of the guy. I remember the guy I sold it to, but I don't know what's happened to it since then. But that was a and Brock had tuned that beautifully too. It was literally a very good A9X, that one.
I'm sure I'd much rather that car than this car, and I can
So, so would I. I can't believe that price.
no. The only way that I would pay $1.5 million for a 2002 V6 VX Commodore is if it had $2 million in the boot.
That's about right.
Yeah.
Well, it's quite funny. I've got some photos at home because a close neighbour of mine had the Phase 4 Moffat GDHO. And when I picked up that car from Moffat, the 77 Special, I actually mentioned one of my neighbours had the red Phase 4 GDHO, and he said, "Well, I can't believe that." And I said, "Well, I sent him some photos." So I went home, gave him a ring, and he bought the Phase 4 GDHO round, and we took some photos next to that 77 Special, and I flicked them down to Moffat. So that goes back, what, 70, probably October, November of 2017. So that car was actually on sold. He sold it about, I think about 3 years ago for about $2 million, that Phase 4.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
the genuine Moffat one, not the Gibson one, and not the one that Bruce Hodgson rolled and is getting recreated or refixed up in Brisbane. It was the Moffat car.
Terry, it's been fantastic having you on the podcast. It's been fascinating chatting with you. I wouldn't be surprised if one day we chat again on this podcast. You've got a lot of interesting cars and a lot of interesting history. So thank you very much.
Not a problem. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us at Performance Car Lounge. If you have a performance car with an interesting story that you are selling, contact us at performancecarlounge.com.au.